Do have a good chaser. Here's the chaser. Especially to our beautiful young co-eds here at Iowa State. Ladies, try to marry an archaeologist because the older you get, the greater interest your husband will take in you. But it's a young discipline. It's only 125 years old. Scientific archaeology began in the 1870s. And look at the hundreds of thousands of artifacts that have been discovered that beautifully, 90% of them rather immediately confirm the biblical record. You can argue about the 10% if you want. You don't hear that. You always hear about the radical, over-the-wall archaeologists who have a totally different time grid from anybody else in the archaeological discipline, and therefore their evidence is going to come up differently, right? Computer people have a word for it: garbage in, garbage out. When you depart from the recognized international standard for archaeology and have your grid 150 years off, like some of them do, sure, you're going to get different results. But by and large, 85 to 90% of the discoveries being made in any land of the biblical world today almost immediately agrees with the biblical record. You can quarrel over the 10 or 15% if you want, but most of the archaeological discoveries affirm the biblical record. And some of the finds taking place are sensational in a good sense. For example, last century the German critics were coming along. I can attack the German critics because I have a German background myself, Maier, you can tell that. But anyway, they were saying, again, like some of the people today are saying, there never was a Jesus, a historical Jesus. You can see it in your computer blog, JesusNeverExisted.com. Some claims are made that he never existed, even as a historical personality. The man on whom we have more primary evidence probably than anybody else in the ancient world. Yeah, he never existed. Well, anyway, one of the critics was named Bruno Bauer. Now, he had originally been a good Christian, but he made shipwreck of his faith and then decided not only was Jesus not Son of God, he wasn't even a human being. He never lived. Well, then even Bruno's colleagues in Germany said, ja, aber. They said, wait a minute. Jesus does interact with historical characters like Caiaphas, the high priest, or Pontius Pilate, the governor who condemned him. Yeah, Bruno's answer was, those are interpolations. Somebody wrote those into the manuscripts to make the New Testament look good. Well, now, too bad old Bruno wasn't around in 1962 when an Italian archaeological expedition was digging away at the waterfront theater at Caesarea, and they came across a strangely shaped stone in a stair landing. They pried the stone out of the matrix, and they found an inscription on the other side. The inscription was in 2-inch Latin lettering, and it reads as follows: to the people of Caesarea, Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea, has presented this building in honor of the emperor Tiberius. You know, I just wish old Bruno had hung around and not gone on to his reward, or whatever direction that was. I shouldn't be judgmental, okay. I would have loved to have gotten Bruno's head in an arm lock and gently rubbed that unbelieving nose of his in the inscription. He could have learned via the Braille method alone that there was a Pontius Pilate. Yeah, here he shows up in stone, okay? This has happened repeatedly in history. All kinds of archaeological evidence has come along, most of it immediately confirming a biblical record. So to a historian, this says we better take a second look at this biblical material and not decide that it's all a collection of early mythology. Now here's another one. 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and of course a stupendous archaeological discovery. I'll give you another one that I think is right up there with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and nobody seems to know about it. I don't know why, but listen, the bones of the first biblical personality ever to come to life were discovered in November of 1990. kind of fresh discovery. I'm talking biblical bones. I'm talking the bones of a gentleman. There, I've given you a 50% chance right there. A gentleman who is well known in New Testament history. And you would think that everybody, even non-Christians, should know his name. Here's the story. November 1990, a bulldozer was excavating south of the temple area in the old city of Jerusalem. I should immediately point out, a bulldozer is not your average archaeological tool. Try brush. Well, the dozer wasn't intending archaeology. The dozer was building the base of a water park. Blue plastic slides and all. And it starts sinking into the ground. So they back it off, turn off the diesels, called in the archaeologists. They shined their flashlights down in the hole there, and without even going inside, these Israeli archaeologists could identify it as a 1st century AD burial site. How could they know that? Because there was a collection of 10 ossuaries inside. Those are limestone chests for burying bones. It's called the second burial method. They're running out of space in the Mount of Olives. You know, like that last scene in Schindler's List. Remember the movie? You can see how grave upon grave. Too many graves. So they were designing a space-saving way of burying people. So they now had the idea of putting the bodies in a sepulcher, let them decompose for a year or two, get the bones that remained and put them in one of these limestone bone chests. Jesus himself was in the second burial system. Hadn't been for the resurrection, as Christians claim, well, they'd have gathered his bones a year or two later and done the same thing. Anyway, now one of these ossuaries was magnificently carved. Beautiful, fluting around the edges, 2 giant rosettes with sub-whorls inside. I've never seen an ossuary so magnificently carved, unlike anything I've ever seen. So there's a VIP inside there, obviously. And on the other side is the name of the VIP. Give it you in Aramaic, and I'll bet quite a few of you will be able to translate. The name of the occupant was Yosef Bar Caiaphas. Yosef Bar Caiaphas. Who does that sound like? Caiaphas, the high priest who was the chief prosecutor against Jesus on Good Friday before the tribunal of Pontius Pilate. Very important person. How come nobody seems to know about that, including Christian pastors? I can be talking to a pastoral conference of 300 pastors, and I'll ask about the biblical bones. Well, 1 or 2% will know. I don't know how to get the story out. It is a lead pipe cinch. It's correct. They've done carbon-14 tests on the bones. They are from 20 centuries ago. They've done other tests to see the age of the bone at death, and we're talking about a 70, 75-year-old person. It works out perfectly only for this particular Caiaphas, the only one with that name, and it is, we might say, a lead pipe cinch. That is the case of the bones of the high priest. Even the Israel Museum, which is not Christian, has taken the question mark away. When they first brought it into the Israel Museum, they had a question mark whether this is the one. They've taken the question mark away. I think it's rather important to understand that the new archaeology taking place and the new finds being made are very, very friendly to the biblical version of what happens in the case of Jesus. Then we've got another test we can level to see if we're going to get reliable, fresh information on Jesus. What about the geographical test? We overlook that one all the time. Who needs geography anymore? We got a Garmin global positioning device. You know, you can't even read them, don't even need a map anymore. Well, the Bible is chock full of geographical names. So it's very important to see if we're getting a con job when it comes to the geography, or are these real places? Now, unlike the holy books of any other world religious system, the geographical locations inside of the Old and New Testament are absolutely authentic. Can't tell you all of them. First 10 chapters of Genesis, cut me some slack. Can't tell you where Eden is located, all right? But after that, we find it's been estimated that 93% of the place names are known, know where they are, and some have been excavated archaeologically. Now that's important because so many other holy books begin like an English fantasy novel. At a time long, long ago, at a place called Middle Earth or something like that. I'm not trying to make fun of other systems. I know, terribly politically incorrect, and I'd be stoned off the platform here. But I'm only trying to show that when you do talk about Bible lands, they are real. There is a real Jerusalem, a real Bethlehem, a real Nazareth, and places like that. We're not kidding anybody. These are real places. So one very important clue when you're checking out your holy book is, are these real places or not? Is the stage solid on which these things happen? And again, you find the Gospels passing that test beautifully. You got a travel record of St. Paul, taking 3 mission journeys at least. Luke faithfully recording wherever they went from place to place, and they're all traceable today yet. Luke's got the order right, is not screwing up the itinerary. So it's very, very reliable, the geography is. Then there's the final test. The words that have come down to us across 20 centuries. What about the other records? What about the inscriptions? What about the coinage? What about the history, which is being written by others 2,000 plus years ago? Now, that's very important information. Archaeologists dream of finding not only stones, but inscriptions. The words are so very important. We have indeed so much lost that I can't even begin to talk about it from the first century. Library fires didn't help. Oh man, remember the biggest library in the ancient world, 750,000 book scrolls? Library at Alexandria.